Welcome to the X Global News Channel. The Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation is trying to hide the details of the strikes on the airfields in Engels and Ryazan. Reports have appeared in Russian propaganda and opposition channels that attacks on strategic aviation airfields of the Russian Federation were carried out using Soviet-made Tu-143 or Tu-141 drones. The same information is actively promoted by the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation. As far as we know from sources on both sides of the conflict, the attacks were carried out by new Ukrainian drones with a flight range of up to 1,200 kilometers and a charge weight of up to 75 kilograms. The Tu-143 has a maximum flight range of 180 kilometers, and even with additional fuel tanks and alterations, it would not be able to overcome the distance of 700 kilometers separating the airfield in Engels from the territory of Ukraine. It is also extremely difficult to launch such a drone from the territory of the Russian Federation, if only because it requires a launcher, and the drone itself is 8 meters long and weighs 200 tons. To deliver it together with the launcher at a distance of 180 kilometers from Saratov secretly is an impossible task. According to a source in the General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation, the Russian military is facing new Ukrainian attack drones for the third time. The first was the attack of Sevastopol Bay, when the frigate Admiral Makarov was damaged. The second is the attack of the airfield in the Kaluga region. So far they have used several units of everything. It is already clear that he can fly at an altitude at which air defense means do not see him. And it flies fast. That is, we are not able to effectively counteract them. We expect that production will be set up by February, and we will receive massive raids on air bases inside Russia for other military and infrastructure purposes. In theory, they can get to Moscow, the distance there is within 700 kilometers, says the Russian military. The Ukrainian military believes that strikes will become more frequent, but they will be inflicted on military and infrastructure facilities. BC warehouses, fuel depots, airfields, communication centers, electrical substations, railway trains with equipment. There is no point in hitting the cities. We will only give additional arguments to those who yell about Bandera and Nazis. In winter, we will be able to respond adequately to rocket attacks. Hardly any of the rashists will think that they suddenly have everything exploding around cities. This is not our task. And in order to reduce the frequency and mass of missile strikes on our country, says the Ukrainian officer. According to Russian sources in the General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation and the Ministry of Defense, the military is trying to hide that Ukraine has long-range weapons capable of destroying targets in regions of the Russian Federation remote from the border. Everything is according to the classics with us. We cannot counteract, so we will pretend that there is simply no threat. In our case, an explosion is a cotton, a fire is a fire. Well, here it is also. The Ukrainian is stupid, he can't create his own effective weapon. He lives only on the luggage of our beautiful USSR, so he uses old Soviet carcasses, which are actually designed to correct artillery fire, and not for shock operations. But who will figure it out? This version will be overclocked further. Then they will add that it was the Americans who helped to remake the Soviet superplane. Nonsense. We will not win the war because we are always trying to discern that the enemy is stronger than us, says one of the officers of the Russian General Staff. The effectiveness of the Russian air defense is low. The main forces have been transferred to the border areas. Only Moscow is more or less tolerably covered, but the air defense of the capital region, according to the soldiers themselves, will miss up to 30% of the targets. The Tu-143 and Tu-141, converted into attack drones, were indeed used by the Ukrainian military to strike targets in Belgorod, Kursk, Bryansk. For longer-range strikes, they are inapplicable due to the limited range of flight. The wreckage from those attacks remained, they will be shown to everyone again, but we will be silent about the real threat. We have generals and politicians with the logic of a 3-year-old child. We need to close our eyes, then it won't be scary, says an officer of the Russian Army intelligence. Let's move on to international news. The Russian embassy called the U.S. Congress a conveyor belt for replicating anti-Russian initiatives. Moscow rejects the resolution of the U.S. Senate Committee on recognizing Russia's actions in Ukraine as genocide, the Russian embassy in Washington said in its Telegram channel. The diplomats pointed out that the American side distorts the facts, refers to the pseudo-historical postulates of Ukrainian politicians about the Holodomor. They clarified that the accusations contained in the resolution are groundless. We reject the accusations contained in the resolution of the Commission of the Upper House of Congress that Russia's actions in Ukraine constitute genocide. Such insinuations are a blatant distortion of the facts, the department replied. The diplomats added that Washington is juggling formulations from UN documents. The Russian side recalled that the Kyiv regime had been causing suffering to the residents of Donbass for 8 years, and American parliamentarians turned a blind eye to it. The Russian embassy called the Congress a conveyor belt for replicating anti-Russian initiatives. The local political establishment is ready to do anything to ensure that the conflict continues, to the last Ukrainian, the statement says. The Hill reported that the number of local residents who support the decision to reduce aid to Ukraine is rapidly growing in the United States. It is clarified that in Congress, representatives of the Republican Party designate their position as realism and claim that the White House can no longer help Ukraine. The reason is high inflation, which significantly affects the lives of American families. Among other things, they believe that the United States should not risk a nuclear war with Russia for the sake of a country that is thousands of miles from America, said columnist Douglas Schoen. Uzbekistan has rejected the proposal of Russian President Vladimir Putin to create a triple gas union. This is reported by Reuters. Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Energy of Uzbekistan Zorbek Mirzamukhmadov said that even if a gas agreement is concluded with the Russian side, this does not mean a union. He clarified that Moscow and Tashkent were negotiating on the supply of Russian gas through the territory of Kazakhstan, but it was just a technical contract. When importing gas from other countries, we cooperate with them only on the basis of commercial contracts. We will never agree to political conditions in exchange for gas, Mirzamukhmadov said. Turkey intends to achieve a discount of more than 25% on the supply of Russian gas. Ankara plans to discuss conditions for lowering import prices during negotiations with Moscow tomorrow, December 9. This is reported by Bloomberg with reference to high-ranking Turkish officials. According to the agency, the Turkish side expects that the discount will be applied not only to payments for 2023, but also to payments made in 2022. If the parties fail to agree on a reduction in prices, Bloomberg clarifies, Ankara intends to achieve a postponement of payments for the supply of Russian gas until 2024. American basketball player Brittney Griner was exchanged for Russian Viktor Bout. The exchange was successfully held at Abu Dhabi Airport, the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs reports. Russian citizen Viktor Bout was imprisoned in the United States after being accused of arms trafficking. Griner was detained in Russia with drugs. In the summer, the basketball player was found guilty and sentenced to 9 years in prison. Washington categorically refused to engage in a dialogue on the inclusion of a Russian in the exchange scheme. Nevertheless, the Russian Federation continued to work actively to rescue our compatriot. As a result of the efforts made, it was possible to agree with the American side on the organization of the exchange of Viktor Bout for Brittney Griner. The Russian citizen has been returned to his homeland, the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs said. The European Union has decided to expand the list of sanctioned goods prohibited for export to Russia, covering equipment that can be used by the country in the aviation and space industry, writes Politico with reference to non-public documents. According to the draft of the 9th package of sanctions, Russia may be banned from supplying aircraft engines and their components, as well as laptops, hard drives, cameras and lenses. The new sanctions should affect not only the aviation and space industries, but also the military-industrial complex and a number of other sectors of the Russian economy. Thus, with the help of a new package of sanctions, the EU intends to stop the buildup of Russian industrial capacities by placing 169 organizations under restrictions whose products can contribute to the technological improvement of the Russian defense and security sector. That was the latest news. Thanks for the like. Subscribe to the channel to keep following the news. See you soon.